That Good morning. I think I've planned a fairly interesting program for this morning. There's going to be a surprise guest, and nobody is going to be more surprised than he is. And we're going to have a look at the West Kootenay schools. But first, I wanted to take you a place where we do one of our Webster-type walkabouts. And it, on the face of it, is a beautiful place. It's set on the tip of Vancouver Island. It has got lovely inlets and bays, tastefully designed, you know, with lots of trees around. It has its own 9-hole golf course. Very nice golf course, as a matter of fact. Some of my best friends have played there for years and years. No green fees either. The younger ones, they, of course, enjoy the soccer with the fresh wind breezes and a well-equipped workshop and nice rooms. Not quite like the Hyatt Regency, but they're good enough, and some are dressed up better than others. It's really quite a delightful place to look at. Grounds are tastefully done. The weather is very good, much better than over here in Vancouver, of course. And if I had a green thumb and not a black thumb, I'd like to work in that particular place. Relaxation, you don't have to hurry to take your books back to the library there at all. And it's a very well-stocked library indeed. Pottery has always been one of my secret cravings. And this guy here, lots of time to practice, excellent potter. And you're going to meet my friend the Birdman of this establishment, also the greenskeeper. Just the one snag. Look at the snag. Listen to the snag. Listen, again. Clang. It's a jail. It's William Head Medium Security Prison. And my reporter, Brian Coxford, takes us on an interesting trip to that William Head Medium Security Prison.
No, I'll come over there as soon as we get into it.
Okay. Test 1, 2, 3. This is Frank Schlosse.
Why don't you put that camera up a bit, Ruben? That's my peripatetic reporter, Brian Coxford, goes to all kinds of places to let you see how they look, because these kind of places we haven't really seen in detail before. William Head, and here's Brian Coxford.
Jack, if you happen to stumble across this particular setting in the early hours of the evening, you'd have trouble recognizing it as a prison. Only if you looked at the front gates, the security, the wire fence, would you know that this is William Head Medium Security Prison. It's just in such a beautiful setting. Maybe that's why the inmates call it the William Head Country Club.
Pleasant as it may seem, even with the degree of freedom which inmates are offered here, and the more responsibility they're given here than in other institutions, or at least a number of other institutions, it's still a jail.
All the cells inside this prison are well painted and they're clean. The food line ain't too bad and the keeper ain't too mean. There's lots of trees and lots of grass and birds and bees and such. But when you've been here for a while...
The main thing I think that's on most inmates' minds is getting out of here, ideal as it may seem.
The 85-acre site was first used back in 1870. It was a quarantine area. That was 3 years after Confederation, and ships that came to enter Canada were required to stop here. Their passengers and crew put off, and they were required to stay here for a quarantine period. Incidentally, that was about the same time that BC entered Confederation. The area itself really didn't become a prison until about 1959, 81 years after the BC pen opened. And incidentally, at that time, it was used as an overflow, a minimum security prison, to pick up the slack from the BC pen. It didn't become a medium security prison until 1964, and it's still in its present form.
Come on. Come on. I don't think there's any other place that would measure up to this. You know, the trees and the flowers. My birds. Oh, they really come in the summer. You know, these swans, they all come in. And the Canada geese and pigeons.
This is Frank Schlosse, the Birdman of William Head, 69 years old, an inmate for 35 years. The ducks, geese, and pigeons are his friends, and he's always pitching prison officials for more food.
Yeah, too bad the family wasn't here, the geese and that, huh? Well, it's a lack of food is what, see, they come here, and if they don't get anything, like this morning, that guy was after me for some food, and I had none. So he just come over and he told his mate, and they flew. But they came back this afternoon. Come on.
How long have you been in William Head, Frank?
I'd say this is about the 6th year, off and on, in between unlawfully at large and escape and things like that.
You went out for a bit of a holiday, did you?
Oh, I had a beautiful holiday for 3 months, just a short time ago. Yeah.
How long have you been in prison altogether?
Oh, about 35 years.
And how would you compare your stay here in William Head to some of the other institutions you've been in?
I think William Head is, rather than use the word the best, as I think is the best, it's unique in that physically, I don't believe there's another prison like it, physically. You know, there's wildflowers, you got the ocean, you got the landscape, or not, what is that term for the grass, keeping the grass cultivated and that. It's really beautiful.
I guess it kind of gives a place a little bit of life then, livens things up around here, makes it look a little better.
Well, too, many people are aware of nature, and it seems to be help their morale.
How old are you now, Frank?
I'm in 69. I'm on number 69.
You hope to get out someday, or?
Geez, I hope so. That I'm having trouble with the parole people. I go before the board next September again.
What are you in for?
Actually, I'm in my convictions and my offenses have been theft. And in 1963, I was declared a habitual criminal, and the primary offense was possession of a stolen driver's license. I have no violent offenses. My offense is mostly made up of fraud, checks, and things like that. And later on in life, I developed different techniques of stealing, and I generally, someone say, "You're a thief?" I know, I'm just a money separator.
The inmates that are here are not considered dangerous.
What kind of a term would they serve in length?
Oh, anywhere from 2 years to life. We have people serving 2 years for breaking and entering, others serving life for various activities.
Any murderers?
Yes, yes. But ones that have done a considerable time within the system and considered probably the one-time offender who is not likely to commit the same act again.
Well, were is a past tense, and actually we're just looking here as to whether the is should be singular or plural. We have one.
Inmates who haven't had a chance to get even the basics in education can start from scratch, be it a verb, preposition, or noun. There's a library with almost every type of book inmates or anyone on the outside might want to read, even magazines of all sorts from the newsstand.
But we're talking about every judge having made a decision. Now, every judge would have to make his own decision.
We've all heard the stories about drugs being a problem at the various federal institutions. Is it a problem keeping drugs out of William Head?
Not a major problem. We have a few minor incidences of drugs, but again, it's been quite some time since any major influx of drugs has shown up.
Is it a fact of life that drugs do get in and out?
Yeah, it's a
More
fact
in
of
and out,
life. Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any kind of problem here with escapes?
We haven't had an incident of escape for a year now. We've had the odd individual return late to the institution from temporary absences, resulting in them being declared unlawfully at large. But we've had no incidences of other crimes being committed when they've been unlawfully at large.
It's not generally a problem.
Not a problem at all.
This is the open concept visiting area of William Head Pen. All 131 inmates are entitled to visits here 5 days a week, most of them coming in the evening hours and on weekends. And while Mom and Dad visit in this open concept area, or friends visit, any children that are along can perhaps enjoy the playground setting just outside along the beach, amuse themselves while the visit takes place up here.
It's a beautiful park-like setting, some of the best fishing in the world here. One inmate hauled in a 44-pound salmon. That's still a record. Last week, another inmate landed a 33-pound.
The inmates that go through the various programs here, how well are they prepared to face life on the outside once they've been through this institution?
We have our electrical program, which equips a man with a C ticket, which allows him to gain employment upon his release. We have pre-apprenticeship training in vocational carpentry and the vocational masonry courses, practical horticultural courses. Inmates are awarded certificates from Camosun College. We follow their curriculum in practical horticulture and also in the use of pesticides, which there's a great demand for outside.
What I'm doing here is feeding these plants with a solution that we mix. This is a hydroponic tank with the...
And then there are other activities such as the cooking course takes place within our institutional kitchen, again under the auspices of Camosun College. They can gain a certificate in culinary arts from Camosun College on completion of that. And then the other work areas provide people with on-the-job training, such as our maintenance shops in plumbing, carpentry, metalwork, and that type of work.
Ted, what's this going to be?
It's going to be a bottle when we get finished with it, Brian.
Plans to continue on with this kind of thing when you get out?
Very much so, Brian. I plan to make it my career when I'm finally released. Set up a small studio in my home and go from there. I was an airline pilot before arriving here. And my career in that direction is finished. So I have to find something else. This will be it.
And this is it, eh?
And this is it, yeah. And this is as rewarding, I would say, as flying. So I'm very lucky in that respect. We're just turning the lip down here to give the top of it some body and some strength.
The inmate accommodation at William Head is in a single 3-tiered dormitory. There are no bars inside, the hallways are open, and the prisoners at this medium security unit are free to walk around at will. Some rooms are small, some taken care of. And there's even a graveyard. This goes back some time to the quarantine days. And a golf course, a 9-hole pitch and putt. And guess who built the golf course? None other than the Birdman of William Head.
I built it, yes, in my, well, I was going to say my spare time. No, it was my full time. It took a lot of time, and I enjoyed doing it. It was a challenging thing. It was a great accomplishment.
Are there some pretty good golfers around here then?
Yes, there are, and we've had some real good golfers here too.
How do you play yourself?
Not bad. I'm not a good golfer, but I enjoy it just as much as anyone.
The need for more institutions similar to William Head would be entirely dependent on the population, the inmate population. Like how many inmates are there that could be classified to this type of institution? But my experience would be say that if all institutions could be as successful as William Head, and if that was a major factor, was the setting of William Head, then yeah, we could use more institutions like William Head.
And the closest thing to freedom is this dream inside my brain. And the only feeling left is that feeling they call pain. And I wonder how some people ever got so inhumane. And the guards just keep on smiling while my life goes down the drain.
All I want to do is, my values have changed to the extent where my needs and desires are simple. That's all I want to do, is just live on. And really, my main interest in life is to be involved with people.
Well, Brian, what did you make of the place?
Pretty positive, actually, as far as you know, medium security prisons are concerned. I've heard these stories about come on over and you know, lower your handicap at William Head, but
Ain't quite true.
no, it's still a prison, but I suppose if you have to serve time, they've perhaps got the right idea there.
Yeah, mind you, a lot of people seen that this morning, you know, and off the top we show everything, don't we? We show the golf course, we show the, didn't show the tennis courts.
No, there's a couple tennis courts, and the day we were there was rather cool, so you'd stay away from them.
The greenhouse, the pottery, the workshops. Why was one of the rooms so grim and one of the rooms so nice? You showed two rooms, one which was kind of plain and one which was all tissied up.
Personality of the inmates, I suppose. You know, the room is what you make it. You can, within reason, you can maybe put an aquarium in there, a radio or whatever. No televisions. There's a couple of common areas for televisions within the dormitory, but they could more or less fix up their cubbyhole
What
the
kind
way
of
they
feeling
want.
did you get in the place? A good atmosphere or a tense atmosphere? You know, going to BC Penn and you can feel the hair standing on the back of your neck. What's the atmosphere like over there?
Absolutely good. I didn't even, you know, you'd have to sort of look around and realize you're in a prison. No tension at all.
Well, you know, Frank was one of the, and I don't know the details of his case, but from what he says, Frank was one of these unhappy people who got caught up in the net of the habitual criminals in Vancouver when they were using it to clear the streets of people who were criminals, but they weren't violent. They were more social pests than anything else, weren't they?
Yeah, for sure.
I love these words. What was the word he used when he said that he'd been a thief all his life? He called himself what?
A money separator.
Money separator. Hey, something else, maybe. I hope Frank's watching this morning. Can I ask you, what was it he meant when he said he'd had a good holiday?
Oh, there's a super story behind that. He went, as you know, the inmates in medium security prisons and that can get passes after they've built up sort of brownie points. He went out on a pass and he failed to return. This was about some time ago. And he's been feeding these ducks and geese for years. And so the day that he left, this is the story that's around William Head.
This is the folklore of William Head.
Yeah. The day he left, his ducks and geese and pigeons left. No more. They weren't there.
They went with him.
They went with him. And 2 days before he was recaptured, and he was gone for 3 months, 2 days before he was recaptured in Vancouver, they came back as if to anticipate his return.
So the ducks and the geese and whatnot have got ESP with, what's his name again, Frank Schlosse?
Frank Schlosse, yeah.
Seems a hell of a nice guy indeed. Mind you, the thing, a lot of people, we're not going to the phones at the moment, but somebody will phone up and say, far too good for them. But when you look at the success or the lack of success in BC Penn, you got to try something.
For sure.
Because remember what Orville Pung, where did he come from, Minnesota?
Minnesota, yeah.
Pung said to me, how would you like to be given a sentence to live in a Holiday Inn for 9 years? And I said, I'd burn the place down. And I think it's a loss of the liberty that really is a serious thing. What about the kids? I saw some children there.
Yeah, and in one of the shots we saw some of the inmates and some of the children walking down one of the streets in William Head. And interesting story there. They're from a retarded home, And for some time now, almost 6 days a week actually, the inmates take in these retarded children. It's a one-on-one situation, and they're severely retarded. They're the kind that would, you know, they just can't be left on their own. The cold hard facts of it, they're the types that they're so severely retarded they'd walk into walls and all kinds of things like that. They've taken them on a one-to-one situation and just talk to them about things, life in general, not about prison life or anything like that. And from what we're told, the improvements in these particular retarded kids has just been amazing.
Yeah, it's quite obvious, you know, when people are looking at that kind of program and to see the guy who said, the potter, that he was an airline pilot. So there's no need for that man to be locked up in some single isolation cell in the BC pen.
No, not a dangerous criminal.
No, no way. I don't think they've got any dangerous people there now.
No, there are, as the director pointed out, there are some people who have been in on murder, but the murderers have served their time in other institutions. It's been established they're not dangerous, then they come here.
Remember what the guy told us at the forensic psychiatric unit last week? He said murder is a family matter.
Right.
And after you've done that murder, you're not going to do any more murders. But the whole thing was quite impressive. What's your next one? No, just a minute. What have we done up to now? We've done the Drunk Tank, which was a kind of walkabout. We've done William Head. We've done Robson Square. We've done, come on.
Forensic unit, you mentioned
Forensic unit. And there's one other. Vancouver Express.
Vancouver Express.
But I think these are good contributions to so that people can see what kind of places they are.
Let me tell you one little line about William Head. We talked about Frank and his geese and his ducks. He's got a couple of other animals here. And one is, I suppose you could call him the come-and-go inmate of William Head. He's a deer. And his basic home is inside William Head, and he wasn't there when we were there. He was out on a pass, I suppose. He comes up to the gate, and there's two gates. He just stands there. They open the gate. He passes into the in-between part. They open the second gate, and he goes. When he wants to come back, it's the same thing. He
comes and stands at the gate.
He comes and stands at the gate.
Why didn't he get that on camera?
He was away at the time.
But Frank was there. He should have been there too. That was very good, I must say. I enjoyed that very much indeed. Thanks very much, Brian. We'll watch for the next one soon. Now, I'm not going to name my next guest. It's a surprise to him, and it's a surprise to me. My next guest, that is. Is it all set to go?
Oh, that'll be on 2
Oh, Henry, how much time are you giving me? For the dust off here. We're going to be on camera dusting off the tape. Did nobody tell you? No, we're going to dust them off here live on camera. You're going to give me 15 seconds, and then you're going to bring up the tape.
Okay. What camera are you going to do?
Mooney, wasn't they told that? Suzanne?
It'll be on this camera.
And am I looking at that?
Yeah. 30 seconds, stand by.
Guess that makes it 90 minutes.
And I'll give you a 15-second count, Jack.
When I came to this country 31 years ago, as a kind of gauche, brash, noisy young reporter, how I've changed. One guy was very helpful to me, Pierre Berton, and I'm going to dust him off and use him at last. The Wild Frontier. Just listen to this. The stories in this book read like the wildest fiction, but all are true. The product of careful archival research, much of it, of course, I might add, previously unpublished. The author? Who else do you expect? It's his 25th book in the last just a couple of years, it seems to me. 25 books from the inimitable, highly professional, a little bit difficult to take on times, but the one and only Pierre Berton.
Hi, Jack.
Pierre...
I thought you were describing yourself there for a moment.
No.
Highly professional, difficult to take.
But let's put it this way, it takes one to know one, doesn't it?
That's right, it does.
Pierre, before I nag you, which I must do to stay in character,
I see.
I want you just to quickly, and I'll give you 25 seconds to give me 25 names of 25 books that you have written.
You want all 25?
All 25.
Royal Family, The Mysterious North, The Golden Trail, Klondike, The Secret World of Og, Adventures of a Columnist, Fast, Fast, Fast Relief, Just Add Water and Stir, Great Canadians, Remember Yesterday, Comfortable Pew, Smug Minority, The Food Guide, The National Dream, The Last Spike, The Great Railway Illustrated, Drifting Home, Hollywood's Canada, My Country, The Dion Years, this one here, The Wild Frontier, The New City. Have I left any out?
Yes, you have.
I can't remember.
The Comfortable Pew.
I think I mentioned that.
No, you didn't.
Didn't I? Well, that was a big one.
The Smug Minority.
I think I mentioned that, but maybe not. I think
Did you?
Yes, I think so.
Perhaps we're both getting into that advanced stage where senility sets in just a little bit.
A bit. I can't remember all those books. Too many.
Pierre, I want to talk first about your book, because I'm ashamed to say that you probably have dug up more British Columbia history than has ever been in the school books. How have you been able to do this?
Through research, just through going through the... I knew most of the stories in advance. They're stories that have been around a long time, and I don't think they're that unfamiliar to people who read a lot of history. They're unfamiliar to the average person because there's not much... People don't read much history anymore. It was just a matter of going to the archives and going back to original sources and finding... I mean, Cariboo Cameron, surely you've heard of him.
Of course I've heard of Cariboo Cameron.
He's a name in your, in your psyche, but you don't know much about him, right?
Cariboo Cameron, I know a fair bit about him. I knew he pickled his wife in alcohol.
That's right. He's been the subject of a good many Sunday supplement features, but not in detail, no.
Before I get serious, I want you to give me the punchline on Cariboo Cameron. Cariboo Cameron, of course, was the man who struck it rich in Barkerville.
That's right.
He made $1 million in 1 year.
I would think so, yeah, about that.
His wife died. Why did he pickle her in alcohol?
Because she said, don't bury me in this awful country. And it was an awful country. It was 700 miles from civilization. There were no roads. So she said, I want to rest back in my hometown, Glengarry County, Ontario. So Cariboo Cameron first put her in a coffin. He didn't have to pickle her at first. She was frozen solid. Dragged her body out in a sleigh with all his kit and a 50-pound sack of gold on top. And the thing was always rolling downhill, you know, and they always have to open up, put the coffin back in the sleigh. 700 miles over no trails. Buried her in the cemetery in Quarter. That's when he pickled her in alcohol. He had a tinsmith make a tin coffin, and they put her in that and filled it to the top with alcohol. In fact, he put his finger to make sure it was filled so it wouldn't gurgle. And the reason he did that, he had to get that body down the coast of North America, across the steaming cauldron of the Isthmus of Panama by a little railway, and up the coast to New York and through the customs, who incidentally didn't believe there was a body in there at all. Weighed 1,100 pounds. They had to haul it out of the ship, and he had to get about 1 million forms. Finally back to Glengarry County, where people really, having seen a man make $1 million in 1 year, you know, believed he hadn't done it honestly. And the rumors spread that really there was no body in the coffin because he didn't open it. He buried it, refused to open it, but that there was gold in the coffin. And people began to believe that he had sold his wife to an Indian prince for her weight in gold. And these rumors, which he ignored, persisted for 10 years until they were published in a strange newspaper article in Cincinnati or Cleveland.
What year would this be that the article was published that she wasn't in the coffin at all?
The mid-1870s.
Not that long ago.
People believed it. And finally, in this Gothic denouement of this weird story, he had to dig her up and get a tinsmith to open up the coffin, and there she was, perfectly preserved, and her mother screamed out, it's Sophie, it's my daughter, she hasn't changed a bit. And Cariboo Cameron said, ashes to ashes, spill out the alcohol. And they poured it in the ground, and the grass never grew again, or so the legend said.
It really is quite a story.
Weird
But
story.
how? I mean, your journalistic license becomes quite obvious in one little phrase used in that conversation.
Which was?
That when they filled the coffin with alcohol, he stuck his finger in to make sure it was full and didn't gurgle.
That's not journalistic license.
Prove it.
Robert Stevenson, who was with him and saw it happen, recorded that in his diary, and in a subsequent article he wrote for a long-dead newspaper called the Vancouver Sunset in 1909. And the Victoria Colonist covered that actual scene at the time. So my documentation is impeccable.
Your impeccable documentation comes from the journalistic license of the newspaper reporter who did the interview in 1909.
No, it wasn't an interview. It was a piece that Stevenson wrote himself. He wrote it twice. He wrote it in the Vancouver paper, and he wrote it in a book that collected stories of George Walkham, a very famous name, edited.
Tell me, Berton, are you the... Pierre, forgive me.
You may call me by my first name, Jack. I think we've known each other for 30 years. You don't have
Tell me, Mr. Berton, you've written more about Canada than any other authors, living or dead?
I wouldn't think so. I think that there are a great many authors who have written as much about Canada as I have.
Name one.
L.M. Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables, that's certainly about Canada.
That's novel stuff.
Never mind, it's still about the country.
You've never written much. In fact, you have not written a novel that I can think of.
One for children, The Secret World of Og.
The Secret World of Og.
My favorite book.
Your best book, of course, they tell me, those people who study writing, because I always look on you as a reporter, was Drifting Home.
Some people think it's my best book. I don't.
Your worst book?
Oh, I read The Mysterious North the other day. It won a Governor General's Award, and I didn't think it was very good. It was my second book, and I was thinking of reprinting part of it. My publisher wanted me to reprint the whole thing, and I refused. It's out of date, and the writing is rather tight. I don't think it's by any means my best book.
Your worst book was The Fast, Fast Sell.
The Big Sell?
The Big Sell, the $5 scam you ran on the public.
Oh, no, I think a lot of people liked that book. It certainly did very well. It was published in the United States.
Listen, you've been everything. Reporter in the Vancouver Sun, Maclean's Magazine, big shot executive in the Toronto Star. You were never on CBC staff.
No, good heavens, no.
You're just the image, along with, you and Gordon are about the same age now, the image along with Gordon Sinclair, a front page challenge, right?
Yeah.
And you'd love, really, to be the bush-jacketed adventurer. That is the Walter Mitty of Berton. And you've carried out your Walter Mitty fairly successfully in real life, have you not?
What do you mean I'd love to be the bush-jacketed adventurer? I have no intention or desire to be an adventurer.
But everything you write with bravado, especially your personal
because I'm
books.
a writer. Just because I'm
No, but I can see you paddling down. In fact, you've written books called Up the Yukon, Down the Yukon, Round the Yukon, Under the Yukon.
I can't paddle a canoe. I hate canoes. I don't know how to paddle a canoe. I went down the Yukon in a rubber raft, and the river took me, and a motor took me. I like creature comforts. I was raised in the frontier. I was raised in a town where it was almost 80 below in the winter, where it was bitterly cold, where all I had to bathe in on Saturday night, the only time we bathed, was a galvanized iron tub, where there was no running water, no indoor plumbing, a town where you couldn't go anywhere or any place. I worked for 3 years in a mining camp, as long as 80 hours a week, up to my waist in ice-cold mud. I don't want to do any of that again. I don't want to live in a cold climate, any colder than the one I live in now. I don't want to live in the Yukon. I like to visit it. I don't like the frontier. I write about it, but it's very uncomfortable. If you're a young man of 22, it's fine. If you're my age, to hell with it.
Yeah, but you've managed, of course, with your giant physique and your overbearing personality, to have the personality...
Look who's talking about overbearing personality. That sits well.
No, but
coming from you.
You're the big, forgive the expression, white, but the big white hunter.
I am?
Yeah.
Well, these are your words.
Listen,
I'll accept anything you say about me, Jack.
My image of you is...
perfect. If you want to perpetuate these myths, who am I to shatter them?
How many books have you sold, Pierre Berton? I want a precise figure
for
my research.
Don't know.
Well, you know how much you make off each book. You know how much money you've had.
Yeah, but I've never sat down and added it up. McClellan said...
I'm not asking how much money.
No, I know. I don't know how many books. I think about it. There might be, and I don't know. I can tell you...
$1 million?
Perhaps. I can tell. If you ask me an individual book, I can pretty well tell you what the individual book sold, but I added it up the other day and I've forgotten.
You've forgotten?
Yeah.
Who does all this research? Other people?
No. What's that got to do with the number of books I've sold?
Well, your memory's awful if you can't remember you added up the other day how many books you'd sold.
I forgot the number.
Well,
but ask me a specific book and I'll tell you.
Okay, remember some facts for continuation of this intriguing interview after this message. Pierre Berton, we had a dreadfully demeaning caper. I'm not blaming anybody yet for the business. Between the Indians from Nootka and the provincial government on the proclivities and activities of one Captain Cook. And of course, let's put it quite bluntly, the Anglo-Saxon white community here was quite agog to celebrate the 200th, I think it was, anniversary of Cook coming around this way, whatever it was. But the Indians of Nootka took considerable offense and said, why stuff this venereal type British commander on our history when it doesn't properly represent what happened in British Columbia? Cook came here as the kind of imperialist archetype who did our civilization a lot of damage. How would you feel about being in the center of that controversy? Would you have sympathy with the natives of Nootka and the Indian groups? Or would you say that the newcomer was entitled to celebrate with pomp and circumstance for the purpose of tourism the arrival of Captain Cook?
Well, there's a good deal to be said on both sides. First, if you're going to celebrate the arrival of any white sea captain, and we probably should, the best one is to celebrate his Cook. He was the best of the lot. He was a good sea captain. He was humane. He was far more interested in the natives than most sea captains. He treated his men well. He didn't have any venereal disease. Don't forget that venereal disease came from North America to Europe. It didn't exist before the discovery of North America. So if anybody had the venereal disease, it was the native peoples of this continent. They gave it to the white men, not vice versa.
I didn't know that.
That's absolutely true. We gave them smallpox and many other diseases, but we did not give them venereal disease. Some of the native peoples haven't read much history, maybe, but nor have the whites. The Nootka Indians profited greatly by Captain Cook and the others that followed. It may well be that their culture was destroyed. To some extent, it was. And that is what happens when one powerful race of people invade the country of another powerful race of people. But Cook wrote the Nootka Indians were the most acquisitive group he'd ever seen. He tried to forage some grass for the goats he kept aboard. And the Indians sold him the grass not once but several times. They said that's their grass. They're a pretty sharp group, the Nootkas, you know. They're good traders.
Which brings me to the point. You tell in some fascinating detail in The Wild Frontier the story of Jewett, the slave of McQuina.
McQuina.
Which McQuina?
Well, there's an argument.
How many McQuinas did they have in Nootka land in those days?
Well, it's a traditional, since this McQuina, the name has been handed down because he was such a great chief. Some historians think that in the McQuina that captured Jewett was not the McQuina who met Cook. I don't think that's true. The evidence that I have, which is pretty substantial, is that it was the same McQuina. And the main evidence, apart from other evidence, is that the McQuina acted the same way. He was the same, his character is not possible to divide it.
All right.
Jewett mentioned that there was another McQuina, and he wrote a voluminous journal.
Let's bring in Jewett. Not everybody can afford to buy this extravagant book. At how much?
$14.95.
Your memory's good on that.
Yes, certainly is.
How much you get at the $14.95?
I get 12%.
You will complicate things, won't you?
You're the mathematician, not me.
That's $14.95, $49, $50.
It's about $1.50 a book. Yeah.
$1.50 that. Do you, by the way, still pay tax in Canada?
Oh, I pay all my tax in Canada.
I knew that was the answer. And one of your celebrated confreres astonished me sometime by moving all his literary benefits to an offshore
Arthur Haley.
Arthur Haley, that's who it was.
Well, of course, he wasn't born in Canada. He was an Englishman, and Canada's a way stop for him. I wouldn't blame Arthur. But I'm born here, and I raised here, and intend to pay all my taxes here, and I pay them all.
Now, the Jewett story in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, without looking at the clock.
He was a 21-year-old blacksmith from England who wanted to seek adventure in the far-off lands of the Indians. He got himself a job as an armorer on board a ship, a sealing ship out of Boston, catching Pribilof seals and sea otters. The ship went into Nootka Harbor. McQuina, as a result of an insult, real or fancied, massacred everybody aboard that ship except Jewett and one of their men. Jewett's life was saved because McQuina knew he could make weapons. And he and his friend Thompson, who he pretended was his father to save his life, became slaves of this Indian prince for 2.5 years.
Don't forget the graphic detail that when McQuina slaughtered the crew, they took the heads off and lined them all up on the deck of the ship.
Well, that was standard. That was the way they killed. That was standard among the Indians of the West Coast, was to behead them for a trophy. It was just not McQuina. But Jewett existed at a time when white men were making slaves of Indians. The Indians of the west coast of Vancouver Island switched things and made slaves of Jewett. And McQuina owned Jewett, had the power of life and death over him, which he might easily have exerted. Jewett had a great deal of common sense. He rolled to the punches. He determined not to enrage McQuina. they really became quite fast friends, you know.
I
When
remember
Jewett-
that because when it came to the escape, McQueen allowed Jewett to send a note out to
Yeah.
the captain of the ship, and with Jewett said, "Hey, come and help me."
That's right, and they captured McQueen. We thought he was going to be killed, but Jewett persuaded the captain to spare his life, and when Jewett finally left, McQueen, tears coursed down McQueen's cheeks. He was going to miss him. He said, "Come back." He said, "I'll give you all the sea otter skins if you'll only come back." It was kind of the syndrome of the hostages and their captors. They grew together because they were tied to each other. One of the interesting things about all the stories in this book is that there is tension between two people in most of them. I think the play of character, the tension that exists between human beings who are thrown together in a wilderness situation is always interesting. It certainly is here.
No more about the book. I mean, Sam Steele was the original Mountie. Fort McLeod, wasn't it? Was that Fort McLeod?
No, he was at Fort McLeod. There was a Fort Steele, don't forget, in British Columbia,
British
Wild
Columbia.
Horse Creek, named after Sam Steele.
Enough of that. You're now how old?
58.
Children?
8.
One wife, 8 children.
That's right.
Incredible.
Same wife.
Incredible family. Prognosis for the future for Berton.
Don't know. I never know. I know what I'm doing at the moment. I'm doing research on a new book on the War of 1812. I'm going to do my program, The Great Debate, this year, and some dialogues with Charles Templeton on the radio. So I know what's going to happen this year. I do not know what's going to happen next year, and I don't want to know.
You are a day-to-day producer.
That's right.
How many months a year do you work?
Well, I don't work at all, in a sense. Well, it depends what you mean by work. I don't toil.
You go to the office.
I go to my office, but I do only do what I like, Jack. You know, I don't do what I don't like. I don't do drudgery or toil. So for me, work and play are the same thing. I like writing books. I enjoy that. I sometimes write books when I go away to Jamaica or places like that.
You are a rampant Canadian nationalist in terms of your pride in the country.
Yes, I like the country. I stayed here. I could have gone elsewhere. I enjoy this country.
Isn't
it
it a pity that a man of your expertise and knowledge never exerted himself in a more direct way in the political life of this country?
Isn't it a pity that a man of your expertise and knowledge never did the same thing? You were very smart not to do it. You'd be a terrible politician, and so would I.
Why would you be a terrible politician?
Because I'm not a guy who can be tied to a single party. I would not get along with the people in my party. I would be a backbencher without any power at all. And not only that, but I don't much like mixing with politicians, and I don't want to live in Ottawa. I don't think that I'd be very useful in that context. I think I'm more useful in the context I'm in now. I think you are too.
Just a minute. Is the country secure?
Well, it's as secure as it's always been. It's as secure as it's ever been, and as insecure as it's always been.
The crisis today surely is much worse now than it's ever been in Canada's history.
I think that this country has moved from crisis to crisis through all its history. I have read enough history and to know enough history of this country to know that this crisis is just a part of a series of crises which we will always face. It is a country which exists on tension. And it may well be, as Herschel Hardin has said in that book I keep plugging of his, A Nation Unaware, that the fact of the tension is what makes us Canadians. That there's, the regional tension in this country is very strong. It's not just Quebec versus the rest of Canada. It's Victoria versus Vancouver. It's Calgary versus Edmonton. It's Toronto versus Montreal. It's Newfoundland versus the mainland. It's the Atlantic provinces versus Upper Canada. This tension is historical.
One day it's got to blow apart, though.
Not necessarily. The tension is something sometimes that holds you together like a magnet.
But Pierre, anyway, will be there only in print. You'll never go out in the hustings no matter what's happened in this country. Supposing we split apart.
No, I'm not.
Is it conceivable?
That's not what I do. Some people are politicians because that's what they do. I'm not a brain surgeon either. That's not what I do. What I do is write books. You must understand that that's what I am, that's what I do. I don't make political speeches.
Apart from your deep involvement in your family, I can't think of you playing golf, jogging.
I do jog 2.5 miles every morning.
Do you?
Mm-hmm. And I'm a bird watcher. Hobbies just like any normal person, Jack.
Pierre Berton, a question I've always wanted to ask you before I dismiss you from the studio. What's your favorite bird?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the scarlet tanager is one of the most beautiful. I think I'd say the pileated woodpecker in Canada, but I've seen birds all over the world.
Isn't that funny? Pileated woodpecker.
Pileated
With a
woodpecker.
little red collar around its neck?
And a big crest on the top.
Can you do its call?
No, I can't. It doesn't make a call. It hammers into a pileated woodpecker hammers into a tree and makes a hole about this big.
Berton, is a failure. He has written 25 books, The Wild Frontier, and he cannot mimic the call of the pileated woodpecker.
I can do the seagull, though, because I was patrol leader of the Seagull Patrol in the Boy Scouts.
Keep the seagull. Pileated woodpecker is your Boyd.
All right.
Thank you, Pierre. None often get a chance to gossip a little bit, but just for your information, that particular program with Pierre Berton was taped. It was the very first taping I did for BCTV, for the Webster show. And we did it 2 weeks before we went on the air. And as you know, regular viewers will know, I've been juggling it back and forward and dumping Pierre, and finally this morning I dusted it off. I've seen him since. He doesn't call himself, he rejects my Walter Mitty view of him. The fact remains is that one day Jack Scott and I and our wives were sitting at Scott's place in Salt Spring Island, and Pierre arrived by plane in the bay. He had flown in from Indonesia, gone down with Janet, his wife, for a quick trip to see one of the family, somewhere in Indonesia or Southeast Asia somewhere. And in he bounces, spends 4 or 5 hilarious hours with us, bounces into his plane again, and off to Victoria and Toronto to creep up an incredible pace. He doesn't call it work, doesn't do any toil, but my goodness gracious me, he's disciplined. I got his job in the Vancouver Sun in 1947, his vacancy when he went east. And very trepidatiously, when I first went east a couple of years later to do stuff, the most gracious, friendly guy in the world was Berton himself. Went out of his way to the new boy, you know, give you a hand so you didn't fall all over your face, all over your feet. Anyway, it's a very good book, The Wild Frontier. And my apologies to Elsa as well. That's a private joke for holding the tape so long. But Elsa, if you're within sight or sound or somebody phones you, at least we used the book, the interview, at just the right time to hit the Christmas trade. Not that the book won't be a success anyway. Now, after the program finished yesterday, I got a flock of calls on the West Kootenay school dispute. All kinds of people trying to get through. Now, this morning I want to go back to the West Kootenay school dispute because of the very tough line taken by, what was his name, Dr. Patrick McGeer, the Minister of Education. And I squeezed him and squeezed him and squeezed him to get some kind of policy decision out of him. And as you'll see from the recapture of yesterday, I succeeded. There's a strike in this province which is driving thousands of parents right round the bend. And I'm talking about the incredible performance up at Castlegar, Grand Forks, Trail and Nelson, where the non-teaching employees of the Nelson district went out October 26. We've had some excellent coverage on the news hour from our reporters up there, the children going into the empty, cold classrooms day after day for short periods, and yet the whole society seems to be essential, seems to be powerless in what might well be an essential services strike.
Yes, well, Jack, of course, I feel very strongly about this, naturally, as the Minister of Education. But I think it's just terrible and disgraceful the way our children are being used as pawns in these disputes. As far as I'm concerned, education is so important, the school should never be closed by anybody under any circumstances. We just cannot afford to have any group consider their own interests so strongly that they would impair the good of the education of our children. And it's been restricted in the past to a few communities. It's the West Kootenays now. Last year it was the Mid-Island. But the very fact that this is taking place and it's now become a habit makes me think that we should begin to think very seriously about altering the system so we simply do not have the schools closing down. And we take the very simple view, which I personally subscribe to, that our schools are too important to be fooled around with in this fashion, and that we should just never have them shut down by anybody.
When will you move to get the Cabinet to apply essential services on the West Kootenay CUPE strike and the school board lockouts in that district?
Well, Jack, it's a Cabinet decision, and the pros and the cons of making that move have to be weighed. Every time you seek a solution to one problem, you may create others. And I can't give you any indication as to what the Cabinet might decide. It's a serious matter, and I completely sympathize with them. I think what's taking place, Jack, is disgraceful.
Have you yet recommended to the Cabinet that they consider essential services?
No, but I'm going to be doing that if it carries on much longer.
Soon?
Because, yes.
Within the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
Pat McGeer will recommend to the Cabinet within 2 weeks, if the dispute is not settled, that the Cabinet consider imposing an essential services back to work.
Correct.
Thank you. You said correct. That was a major decision, or a major announcement, which Dr. McGeer made yesterday. And now here's one of the calls from Trail, which I got yesterday after the program. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, Jack. I watched the program yesterday, and I saw and heard Dr. McGeer. And I'm a little disappointed in him saying that he will wait 2 weeks. Really, this situation has gone on for 5 weeks this time, and it is the second strike our students have endured this year. The first one was in February, and it lasted for approximately 5 weeks. It started February the 6th and finished on March the 8th. Now this time, the QP struck the Nelson School on October the 26th, and the other school districts responded with a lockout. Now this is 5 weeks duration. That is 10 weeks already that our students have not been able to attend regular classes. Yesterday, the students went to attend school as usual, which they have been doing part-time. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for half a day, 1 week, and then on the following weeks it's just Tuesdays and Thursdays. When they went yesterday, and I'm speaking for Trail, this is what I know about,
Right.
the road was blocked by picketers for the union. This is illegal to begin with.
You mean the roads were blocked so that the children couldn't even go to school on their own for the short period in the cold classrooms?
No, they couldn't. There were about 50 pickets, and there was only one road to the school, and it was blocked completely. So the school was shut down. Now, this morning, I had a phone call which told me that there were picketers at the junior high school in Trail, which resulted in that school being shut down.
That's this morning.
That's this morning.
You mean the road is blocked?
Well, the road at junior high, there isn't just the one road. It's right in the center of Trail.
But the children couldn't even go into the classrooms?
No.
That seems a bit rough, doesn't it?
The teachers are willing to teach.
No, they're not, are they?
Pardon?
Are they have the teachers been going in the unheated classrooms too in some cases?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh.
And they have been trying to provide as much education as they can to the children. But yesterday, they weren't even allowed to do that, nor were the students allowed into the school. And this is a drastic situation.
Well, I can see the problem McGeer has. Here you've got a set of labour laws organised in British Columbia, which by and large have done a reasonable job to some extent. And then when the non-teaching staff goes out, you're dead.
Well,
one doesn't normally think of schools as essential services if you're looking at it from a point of view of, labour administration. Do you really regard it as that essential that the Cabinet should order them back to work by law?
I regard it as absolutely essential.
Money, and the other is the rights of workers to have some say within their jobs. But these are like local issues. The chief issue that we are fighting here is the concept of accreditation. I was very disheartened by Mr. McGeer's statement yesterday when he said he had to do something. Well, the point he should be trying to do something at is at the level of the trustees.
Now, just a minute, before you get me confused. You're saying that you object to the school boards banding together to negotiate as one body in a number of districts?
Exactly, legally banding together.
That's right, legally banding so that nobody can pull out.
Exactly.
And that stops you from the opportunity of picking off the school boards one at a time.
Well, it doesn't stop us from picking off the school boards one at a time. Each school board has its own peculiar problems, and they're things that you resolve at the bargaining table.
But the point I'm making, and I'm not trying to be difficult, is that if they are legally accredited, such as just been rejected by the municipalities and the GVRD, it means that if one dispute comes to a head, all districts are locked out by the school boards in the group.
Exactly.
Is that right?
We had an example of that in the East Kootenays where out of 6 school boards, one didn't settle. The other 5 school boards were locked out, I think, for an extra 9 days.
Now give me that again. When was that one?
That was this fall.
That was in the fall, so there were 6 in an accredited group legally bound together. Is that right?
One didn't settle, the other 5 continued in lockout.
The one didn't settle, so that one that was not prepared to settle was able to force a lockout on all 6 of the school boards against the CUPE employees.
Yes, that's what we're saying, and we're saying that's stupid. That if somebody wants to go on strike in an area, they have the privilege to do it. But it shouldn't affect everyone.
But there's a bigger thrust in that going. I mean, I think you got to be fair from, not McGeer's point of view, he's a politician. The school trustees are under an incredible hammer to try and reduce the incredibly inflating costs with reduced number of pupils, certainly in some other areas down here. It may be different in the Kootenays. How do the school trustees try and keep a handle on money?
Well, the point is that what we're asking for in our area is just a fair and decent wage.
How much do you get paid now? Is it possible to give me, for instance, I can tell you in the... Pardon?
$608 a month. It's taken me 2.5 years just about to get to that level.
Not very big money.
No, and that's what we're saying. Like, inflation, the AIB has cut us back so bad, we have nowhere to go.
Well, the answer may be $900 a month and half the number of employees, though. Because the school boards are under the social credit government's hammer on school costs. 5%, not a nickel more. And if it's a nickel more, you got to get it out the local property owners.
Well, it doesn't come out of the local property owners. The majority of the education system, as you know, is financed through our taxation. And if we get less in the Kootenays, some other district in the coast gets more, our money is used to subsidize a district down in the coast. Where's the logic in that?
Just a minute. Even if I were to accept that, the fact is that Bennett and McGeer have said 5% extra and not a nickel more. And if you go beyond that budget, you pay for it out of your local resources, which can be industrial and domestic property taxation.
The point is that 5% of Dr. McGeer's salary is something. 5% of mine is just about nothing. And we're saying, as Stats Canada says, $1,000 a month for a family of 4 is a decent living wage, and we're saying that should be an accepted standard for all of our employees.
No, it's higher than that. It's, I think, yeah, $12,000 a year for a family of 4. But how can you expect the school boards, or for the government for that matter, to say, okay, if you are on $600 a month, we're going to increase the wages by 60% arbitrarily? The taxpayers would be out with shotguns.
The point is, though, Mr. Webster, is that that's false economy. Making the ordinary worker poor does not make our country strong.
All right, let's get to the next issue. We've covered that fairly well. What about the fact that the children are being quite brutally, because of the dispute, the lockout as well as the strike, denied much of their winter's education? And you had that woman from Trail telling us that they couldn't even get into the classrooms yesterday in the high school because of pickets on the road.
Well, the point of that is, Mr. Webster, is that those children anyway are getting half, a third, a quarter of their education. And as long as it appears that there is some kind of education, there is no pressure on the local trustees to put pressure on the accredited agency to end the dispute. You know, and that is what the union is trying to do, is we're trying to tell the trustees, get serious and end the dispute, reach a fair contract, and it'll be finished.
You want to close the schools regardless, to put the pressure on the trustees, and the hell with the kids' education for the moment.
Well, my child is in school, and I know what kind of education he gets, Mr. Webster, and it's pretty shoddy.
Are you attacking the teachers?
But it is shoddy.
Are you attacking the teachers?
I'm not attacking the teachers. I'm attacking the situation that the trustees have created by not negotiating fairly.
Right, one other question. What is the position of the teachers? What are they actually, are they supporting you and not crossing picket lines, or are they free, if they wish, except for the road pickets, to go in and out?
Yes, we put up a picket line around a high school and they did not cross it.
But normally they've been going in to give this part-time chili classes, is that right?
Right.
Well, Mr. Kinakin?
Well, you know, the thing that I wanted to mention, Mr. Webster, though, is what Dr. McGeer said yesterday has just polluted the waters here.
Well, he says 2 weeks he'll campaign in the cabinet for a back-to-work order under the Essential Services Act.
Well, you know, what he has done, though, is that we are going into mediation on Thursday, our local, through the Ministry of Labor. Now, the Minister of Education has said he is going to apply essential service, and what he's done is put a gun to the head of the workers at that meeting. Doesn't the Minister of Education talk with the Minister of Labor, or are we going to see another example of the Minister of Education licking saliva off his shoe in the cabinet again? Like, what is he trying to do?
Well, I asked him the questions, and he didn't have to answer. And he answered. Mr. Kinakin, thank you very much for your contribution.
All right.
Thank you. More calls from the Kootenays after this break. The Kootenay school dispute. Go ahead from Trail, ma'am.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm a bit nervous. My
Don't be
father's a janitor,
Uh-huh.
and he hears very poorly, and so I'm phoning more or less on his benefit and agree with the union side of the story. I know our country has been torn apart by strikes, and more people suffer from it than gain anything from it. But I think because of this, and we take a general view of all the unions being very militant and getting more so every year, that it's very dangerous to automatically start pointing fingers at the union and saying, those are the people that have to go back to work. If those people go back to work, then my children will be educated, and make a generality of the thing and never realize that there's two sides to the story.
No, there are 3 sides, 4, 5, 6 sides. There's the side of the CUPE union, there's the side of the teachers, there's the side of the school boards, and there's the side of the taxpayers. But you're saying that your father is solidly and willingly on strike as a janitor. Thank you, ma'am. From Castlegar, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I have 2 young children in in elementary school, and they are being seriously affected just by going half a day. Now, granted, they are giving them half a day's work, but the pressures on elementary alone are quite severe.
Very briefly, do you want McGeer to order them back to work?
Yes, I do, but I'd also like to point out that in this area we have a very high vandalism rate at our schools.
You mean before or after this dispute?
Before this issue.
You mean it's bad anyway?
It's been terrible in this area for vandalism of the schools.
Who does it?
And I take my hat off to the janitors who have to clean up a lot of the mess.
Oh, I see what you mean. Thank you, ma'am. Salmo, go ahead, please.
I'm a teacher in Salmo.
Yes, ma'am.
Who happens to be home with the flu today, and I'm enjoying your program.
Thank you. You should watch it every day you're home with the flu.
We are at school teaching under somewhat adverse conditions. I would like to say that both the board and CUPE have an argument, but teachers in the West Kootenay area have been on compulsory arbitration for as long as I've been teaching, and we haven't lost any money, or we've done quite well in our wage negotiations.
You know, you raise a very good point. If arbitration is good enough for the teachers by which they in effect do not strike, why can't they have arbitration for the non-teaching staff and get the dashed thing over with?
Exactly what I mean. So then we would not have the strike to start with. I don't think calling in essential services after it's been going for 5 weeks is good enough. If we had compulsory arbitration, there would be no strike to start with.
Thank you, ma'am. A call from Trail from a CUPE official, I think. Is that correct? Hello, CUPE.
Hello there, Jack.
Do you want to give me your name?
Yeah, I'm Alan Underwood. I'm Secretary of Local 1285 of the Trail School District.
And do you feel very upset by McGeer's threat?
Well, I can't get too uptight over McGeer's threats. When Bennett's away, the mice do play. Without being facetious, Jack, I don't know really what's been going on your program this morning because I'm phoning from our lockout headquarters.
What happened, quite frankly, was I had McGeer on yesterday, and under pressure from me, he said that unless this strike is settled within 2 weeks, he will advocate in the Cabinet that the Essential Services Act be used to order CUPE back to work and the school boards to lift the lockout.
Well, I certainly am in agreement with the school boards lifting the lockout, but as a union person, I can't agree with essential services for any labor dispute. I don't think that's the answer.
Do you feel guilty about the children, the way the children are suffering, because they are undoubtedly suffering?
I can't feel guilty, Jack. I feel very, very concerned. I'm concerned for the disruption in the education, just as I'm concerned about the loss of wages for the 60-odd members in our local.
What's the answer, then?
Well, I think the answer is for the school boards to realize the stupidity of the type of negotiations that they're trying to conduct and get down to meaningful negotiations and get a settlement.
Look, why can't employers, why can't employers go the one big organization way the same way as unions do? More clout.
No, look, We have 5 local unions in this area that are involved in this dispute, and each one of those local unions has local autonomy and has the right to negotiate for their membership. They have not given that right up as a group.
Yeah, but have the
The
employers...
employers done.
The employers
and the
have done.
ridiculous situation is that in our local 1285 with the Trail School District, you're talking about the cost to the taxpayer if it was a direct cost to the taxpayer. We have done some figures, Jack, and the cost to the average taxpayer in Trail School District to have prevented this lockout was 77 cents.
What do you mean 77 cents?
77 cents extra on their taxes for a year to have averted this lockout. The difference between what's basically been offered and what could have reached a settlement.
Just a minute, though. You must consider the school board's pressure from the taxpayer. I mean, and the pressure from the social credit government, which says 5%, any more, you get it out the backs and the skins of the local people.
Jack, our teachers have just gone through negotiations. They're going into binding arbitration, and I can guarantee you out of that binding arbitration there'll be at least a minimum of 7% come out of that arbitration award.
Not only 7%.
When you start talking percentages, 7% of teacher salaries is a heck of a lot different to 7% of janitor salaries.
Okay, hold it there a second. They will get 7%, and most of them will get an additional 3% annual increment.
Right.
Which is at 10%. What percentage have you been offered?
We've been offered over a 2-year period 15.9 maximum and 15.3 minimum.
Not bad.
Not bad
Not
until
bad
you look
at
at the
all.
rates, Jack. A janitor in the Trail School District presently makes $6.20 an hour.
Is that not bad?
Janitor at Caminco makes $7.40 an hour.
You can't expect the same out of the schools as you get out of Caminco. Caminco operates...
And we're not asking for the same, Jack. An
Caminco
Okanagan
operates on a
janitor is
profit or loss.
$6.92, which is still
All
a
right,
lot
one
lower
final
than
question.
Caminco.
One final question. Would you go for binding arbitration like the teachers?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because binding arbitration is fine. It's been fine for the teachers because it's worked for the teachers.
Why wouldn't it work for
There's
you?
something I'd like to clarify. The teachers were not put under binding arbitration compulsory-wise. They were put under it on a voluntary basis through their association.
Sure as God made little apples, unless you settle the strike sometime, you will be ordered back to work under binding arbitration.
Well, then that'll have to be government legislation, and we'll have to fight that when it comes along.
Thank you for your call. Webster. Okay, I'll take Nelson. What other long-distance calls? I'm going to try and whip in 3 brief calls from Nelson, Castlegar, and Trail. First to Nelson. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Yes, ma'am. Speak up.
Oh, all right. I'm wondering what would have happened if this dispute had gone on in Vancouver. Would it have gone on for 5 weeks in Vancouver with children having 2 hours a day of classes?
No, it would not.
We're discriminated against.
Well, it's a question of where you sit, more or less, but I predict it would not have happened for 5 weeks in Vancouver. Although give BC TV News credit. We've given you good live coverage from up there and continued it through the news hour.
Yes, I'm very
But
glad
not
that
it-
we've had some news from our...
But you're right, ma'am. The concentration of the media on the lower mainland would have brought a quicker end to it down here than happens in the Kootenays.
Oh, I'm sure. Because I can't imagine anybody in Vancouver
Have you-
letting their children go to school for 2 hours a day in an empty...
In a cold, unheated schoolroom.
Pardon?
In a cold, unheated classroom.
Right, right.
Tell me, how many children do you have in school?
I feel that we have been discriminated against by those who are in power in Vancouver and Victoria, because this on the lower mainland couldn't have gone on like this.
Agreed, ma'am. Go ahead from Castlegar.
Yeah, I'm a student at Castlegar, Stanley Humphreys.
Right.
And we've been locked out today from the CUPE. They picketed in front of our school.
You mean were you allowed in yesterday?
We were allowed in yesterday, but we were not allowed in today.
What happened this morning when you got to the school?
There's about 50 CUPE members striking out in front of the school, and the
You mean
teachers weren't allowed in.
Blocking kids.
Pardon me?
Blocking kids.
Yeah.
You mean they're standing there in a row?
Well, 50 CUPE members picketing in front of the school.
And how did the students take it? What did they say or do?
Well, the students in Castlegar didn't mind it too much, because when the strike was on, they brought in somebody to run the boilers, in the school, and they made us go back to school after they turned the boilers off. So I would expect CUPE to take action after they put the boilers back on, as anybody would.
Are the boilers on or off just now?
Well, they were for a couple of days, and then CUPE members actually got the guy from who was running the boilers to leave town. Running the boilers.
They got the guy who was running the boilers to leave town.
Yeah, well, they were getting on his nerves. They were following him. They were outside the school every night when he tried to get in.
Oh, they were following him around, giving him a bad time. Do you know that for sure, or have you just heard it?
No, it was. They wouldn't even let him out of his hotel room.
They barricaded him in his hotel room?
Yeah.
You mean they made life difficult for him?
Yeah, for running the boilers during the strike.
And so this morning there are no boilers on in the Humphrey School, 50 CUPE picketers, and you just turned back and went home again, did you?
Yeah.
What do you want to see happen? Do you want to see the government order the CUPE people back to work?
Yeah, I want to see CUPE back to work, but I wouldn't mind if they got what they wanted as well.
Okay, thank you. Trail, go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I just have one brief comment and then maybe a question. It all comes back to one basic thing, that the first thing they've got to do is get back to bargaining. And it appears that Mr. Pike, who is the union representative, bargaining agent, whatever, doesn't seem ready to do this. There's been quite a few articles in the local paper here, and there's one statement here where this Gilmore has offered to meet alone with Pike, and Pike has refused that. Now, what I would like to know is how any CUPE member can actually expect to get any kind of a settlement with such an arrogant lunatic as Mr.
Oh, no, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. What's my count?
So now some...
You got to be careful how you describe people. You know, if I describe people, I choose them carefully. But I get your point. I can't answer the question. I got to take a break. Thank you for your call. Well, did our best to give some attention to the school disputes in the Kootenays. A most unhappy situation. Now, I don't know what the answer is, but I know this much, that perhaps McGeer and the Labour Minister should do something quite specific. Linda, tomorrow, anything planned?
We have Warren Allman with us tomorrow.
The former Solicitor General.
No, Consumer and Corporate Affairs.
He should be good fun. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. precisely.